visible on her arms. The life insurance money from her husband's death, clearly funding something other than her son's welfare. "Tommy's fine," she had slurred earlier when Marcus confronted her. "Mind your own business." But it was Marcus's business. He'd made a promise to Russell LeBlanc in a foxhole in Afghanistan 3 years ago, moments before an IED took Russell's life. "If something happens to me, take care of Christina and Tommy," Russell had whispered through blood-filled lungs. "Promise me, brother." Marcus had promised, and Marcus Long never broke his word. The call to child services had been worthless. Christina had connections through her dealer, a low-level city official who made problems disappear for the right price. The system had failed Tommy, just like it had failed so many others. But Marcus wasn't the system. He was something else entirely. Standing 6'3" with the build of the man who'd spent 12 years in special forces. Marcus had learned that sometimes justice required taking matters into your own hands. His weathered face, marked by a scar from his left temple to his jawline, carried the weight of decisions most men never had to make. At 35, he'd killed 17 men in service to his country, and he'd never lost sleep over a single one. 3 weeks later, Christina LeBlanc was found dead of an apparent overdose. Her dealer, coincidentally, had been arrested the same night on charges that would put him away for 20 years. Charges based on evidence that mysteriously appeared in his apartment. Tommy was placed with Russell's sister in Colorado, where Marcus had quietly established a trust fund that would see the boy through college. Marcus drove home through the Detroit streets, past the house he'd bought with his military savings and disability pension. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked few questions. Perfect for a man who valued privacy. He pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment, studying the house he'd called home for 2 years. Inside, Ashley was probably asleep or pretending to be. Their marriage had been cooling for months, though Marcus couldn't quite pinpoint when or why. Maybe it was his frequent trips to check on Tommy, or the nightmares that still woke him some nights, or simply the fact that a man who'd spent his adult life in combat zones didn't easily adapt to suburban domesticity. Ashley Haynes had been a nurse at the VA hospital where Marcus received treatment for his injuries. Beautiful, blonde, with bright green eyes and a smile that could light up a room. She'd seemed to understand his struggles, had been patient with his adjustment to civilian life. They'd married after a year of dating, and for a while, Marcus thought he'd found peace. But peace, he was learning, was a fragile thing. Chapter 2. Fractures. Ashley Long stood in front of the bathroom mirror, applying makeup with practiced precision. At 28, she'd maintained the looks that had first caught Marcus's attention. But lately, those looks served a different purpose. She was meeting Nicholas Randall for lunch, officially to discuss her application for a nursing position at his private practice, unofficially for reasons she tried not to examine too closely. Nicholas was everything Marcus wasn't: smooth, charming, financially successful. His family practice catered to Detroit's wealthy suburbs, and his BMW sat in the restaurant parking lot like a promise of a different life. He'd been pursuing Ashley for months, ever since she'd brought her resume to his office. The job offer was real, but they both knew it wasn't the only thing on the table. "You deserve better than this," Nicholas had told her during their previous lunch. "A man who appreciates what he has, who can provide the life you should be living." Ashley had tried to defend Marcus, but the words felt hollow. Her husband was a good man, she knew that. Honorable, loyal, protective. But he was also distant, haunted by whatever had happened to him overseas. He'd disappear for days without explanation, claiming veteran affairs or helping other soldiers adjust to civilian life. She'd stopped asking where he went. Marcus arrived home as Ashley was leaving for her job interview. He kissed her cheek, a gesture that felt more like habit than affection. "Good luck today," he said, though something in his eyes suggested he knew more than he was letting on. "Thanks. I should be back by 3. Marcus watched her drive away in her silver Accord, noting the time, the direction, the license plate number, habits from another life that died hard. He'd been trained to observe, to gather intelligence, to read people's intentions through their actions rather than their words. And Ashley's actions lately told a story she wasn't ready to speak aloud. He spent the morning cleaning his weapons. Not because they needed it, but because the routine calmed him. The Glock 19 he'd carried in Afghanistan, the K-bar knife that had saved his life in Kandahar, the Remington 870 he'd bought for home defense. Each weapon was maintained to military specifications, oiled and ready, though he hoped never to need them again. The phone rang at 11:47 a.m. Marcus answered on the second ring. Marcus Long. This is Detective Bailey from Detroit PD. We met a few months ago regarding the LeBlanc case. Marcus remembered Corey Bailey, a good cop who tried to help Tommy before the bureaucracy shut him down. What can I do for you, Detective? There's been some interest in Christina LeBlanc's death. Internal Affairs is asking questions about the timing, about who might have had access to information about her dealer's operation. Marcus's voice remained steady. I'm sure you handled everything by the book. I did. But Marcus, Bailey's voice dropped. Be careful. There are people who think Russell's friends might have been more involved than they let on. People with long memories and short tempers. The line went dead. Marcus set down the phone and walked to his kitchen window, which offered a clear view of the street. A dark sedan sat at the corner, 2 men inside, one talking into a radio. They'd been there for 20 minutes. Marcus smiled grimly. He'd dealt with surveillance before, both conducting it and evading it. If someone wanted to play that game, he was ready. But first, he had other business to attend to. Ashley's lunch reservation was at noon at Romano's, an upscale Italian place downtown. Marcus knew this because he'd checked her computer history the night before. Her password was still their wedding anniversary, touchingly naive for a woman planning an affair. Chapter 3, Revelations. Marcus sat in his truck across the street from Romano's, watching through high-powered binoculars as his wife laughed at something Nicholas Randall was saying. The doctor was handsome in a polished way. Expensive suit, perfect teeth, manicured nails. The kind of man who'd never had dirt under his fingernails or blood on his hands. They were sitting in a corner booth, Ashley's hand resting on top of Nicholas's on the white tablecloth. Even from a distance, Marcus could read their body language. The way Ashley leaned toward Nicholas, how their fingers intertwined, the intimate smiles they shared. This wasn't a job interview. This was a couple in love, or at least in lust. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. But it wasn't the crushing devastation he might have expected. Instead, it was the same calm that had come over him in combat when everything went to hell, a crystalline clarity that burned away all emotion except purpose. His phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Interview running long. Might be late tonight. Don't wait up. Marcus typed back. Good luck. Love you. But love, he realized, was past tense now. He followed them from the restaurant to Nicholas's condo downtown, a converted warehouse in the trendy riverfront district. From his vantage point in a parking garage across the street, Marcus watched them disappear into the building. Ashley's car would be parked in the guest section of the underground garage. She was learning to be careful about appearances, though not careful enough. Marcus made 3 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator named Grant Cannon, a former Delta Force operator who owed Marcus a favor from their time overseas. Grant could get photos, video, whatever evidence might be needed later. The second call was to Spencer Sherman, a computer specialist who'd been in Marcus's unit before transferring to cyber warfare. Spencer could hack anything with a circuit board and had been making a very comfortable living in the private sector since his discharge. The third call was to Alfred Copeland, who officially ran a security consulting firm and unofficially provided services that fell into legal gray areas. Alfred had been Marcus's commanding officer for 3 years and understood that sometimes civilian problems required military solutions. I need a full background workup on 2 subjects, Marcus told Alfred after exchanging pleasantries. Nicholas Randall, family practice physician, lives downtown Detroit. And I need to know who's been watching my house. Personal or professional? Both. Alfred's voice carried understanding. I'll have what you need by tomorrow. You want me to ask what this is about? Better if you don't. Roger that. Watch your 6, Marcus. Marcus drove home, his mind already shifting from hurt husband to tactical mode. Ashley's betrayal was a wound, but wounds healed. What mattered now was gathering intelligence, identifying objectives, and developing a plan of action. He found Ashley in the kitchen when he arrived, still in her interview clothes, but somehow different. Guilty, excited. The flush in her cheeks and the way she avoided his eyes told him everything he needed to know about how her afternoon had gone. "How was the interview?" Marcus asked, settling into his chair at the kitchen table. "Good. Really good. Dr. Randall said he'll have a decision by next week." Ashley busied herself making coffee, her back to Marcus. "How was your day?" "Productive. Had some interesting conversations." Ashley turned, studying his face. Marcus had learned to school his expressions long ago, and she found nothing there but mild interest. "With who?" "Old friends. You know how it is with military guys. We like to keep in touch." That night, Ashley went to bed early, claiming exhaustion. Marcus sat in his study, a converted bedroom where he kept his military memorabilia, awards, and photographs from his service. Russell LeBlanc's picture sat on the desk, taken during their last leave together. Russell had been grinning, arm around Christina, completely unaware that his wife would betray his memory and endanger his son. Marcus opened his laptop and began typing. If Ashley wanted to play games, he'd show her how a professional played. But first, he needed to understand exactly what kind of enemies he was facing. The surveillance team, Nicholas Randall's background, Ashley's motivations, all pieces of a puzzle that would determine his next moves. By dawn, Marcus had the framework of a plan. It would be elegant, thorough, and absolutely devastating. Ashley and Nicholas thought they were writing a love story. Marcus would teach them they were actually starring in a tragedy. Chapter 4. Intelligence Gathering. The knock came at Marcus's door at exactly 0800 hours. Alfred Copeland stood on the porch, looking like any other businessman in his charcoal suit and wire-rimmed glasses. Only someone with military experience would notice the way he carried himself, the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats or the slight bulge under his left armpit. "Coffee?" Marcus asked, leading Alfred into the kitchen. "Black." Alfred set a manila folder on the table. "Your surveillance team is interesting. Detroit PD Internal Affairs, but they're not investigating you for Christina LeBlanc. They're looking for Russell's old unit because someone's been asking questions about military contractors working in Michigan." Marcus poured 2 cups and sat down. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest someone thinks Russell might have been involved in activities beyond his official military record. Someone with enough juice to get IA to do their dirty work." Alfred opened the folder, revealing photos and documents. Nicholas Randall, 32, graduated University of Michigan Medical School. Established his practice 4 years ago with a loan from his father-in-law, Senator Donald Parrish. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd heard of Parrish during his military service, a defense contractor's wet dream, consistently voted for expanded military budgets, while his family's companies somehow managed to win a disproportionate number of contracts. Parrish's daughter is Elena Parrish Randall, Alfred continued. Married to Nicholas 5 years ago. Separation filed 3 months ago. Divorce proceedings ongoing. Guess who's representing her in the divorce? Marcus studied the photograph of Elena Parrish Randall. Beautiful brunette, expensive clothes, the kind of woman who'd never forgiven her husband for looking at other women. Let me guess, someone who specializes in taking cheating husbands for everything they're worth. Bingo. And get this, the separation was filed the same week Nicholas first contacted your wife about the job position. The pieces were falling into place. Nicholas wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was setting up Ashley as evidence for his own divorce proceedings. A man looking to trade one wife for another probably tried to minimize what he'd lose in the settlement. "There's more," Alfred said, sliding another photograph across the table. "This is Pablo Johns, Parrish's chief of staff. He's the one who got IA interested in Russell's unit. Apparently, someone convinced the senator that Russell was involved in unauthorized weapons trafficking, and Parrish wants to know if any of his old friends might have inherited the business." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Russell sold vacuum cleaners door to door before he enlisted. The most illegal thing he ever did was keep a Nazi knife he took off a dead Taliban commander. "I know that. You know that. But Parrish doesn't, and he's got enough political weight to make problems for anyone associated with Russell's name." Marcus studied the intelligence reports. Senator Parrish was using his influence to investigate Russell's friends, probably as a favor to his son-in-law. Nicholas needed dirt on anyone who might interfere with his plans, and Ashley's military husband represented a potential threat to his carefully orchestrated divorce strategy. So Nicholas doesn't just want my wife, Marcus said slowly. He wants me neutralized. Alfred nodded. Looks that way. You got a choice here, Marcus. You can lay low, let them finish their investigation, and hope they don't find anything worth pursuing. Or I can remind them why Special Forces operators aren't good people to threaten. Your call. But if you decide to play offense, you'll need to be smart about it. Parrish has resources, and Nicholas has money. They can make life difficult. Marcus stood and walked to the window. The surveillance car was gone, but that didn't mean anything. They could be using different vehicles, different tactics. In Afghanistan, he learned that the enemy you couldn't see was usually the most dangerous. I need something else, Marcus said. Complete financial records on Nicholas Randall and Elena Parrish Randall. Medical practice income, assets, debts, everything. And I need to know about their social circle, who they trust, who they owe favors to, who might be willing to sell information. Alfred closed the folder. What are you planning? To keep my promise to Russell, and to teach my wife what happens when you betray someone who's killed for his country. That afternoon, Marcus received a call from Grant Cannon. The private investigator had been busy. Your wife and the doctor are creatures of habit, Grant reported. Same restaurant every Tuesday and Thursday. Same hotel room every Friday afternoon. I've got photos, video, audio recordings. Enough to end any marriage in any courtroom in America. What about their security? Sloppy. They think they're invisible because they use cash and park in different garages. But they don't check for surveillance, don't vary their routes, don't even turn off their cell phones. Amateurs. Marcus felt a familiar satisfaction. Ashley and Nicholas were operating like civilians, thinking like civilians. They had no idea they were playing against someone who'd spent 12 years learning how to hunt human beings. Keep watching them, Marcus instructed, and expand surveillance to Nicholas's wife. I want to know everything about her routine, her friends, her lawyers. Everything. Copy that. Marcus, you want some advice from an old soldier? Shoot. Whatever you're planning, make sure you can live with it. Some bridges, once you burn them, don't ever get rebuilt. Marcus hung up the phone and walked to his study. Russell LeBlanc's photo still sat on the desk, and next to it, Marcus placed a wedding photo of himself and Ashley from their honeymoon in Colorado. 2 promises made, both now broken by people who should have honored them. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to Spencer Sherman. If Nicholas Randall wanted to play politics, Marcus would show him what real warfare looked like. Chapter 5, Preparation. Spencer Sherman's fingers flew across the keyboard in his downtown Detroit apartment. Multiple monitors displaying code, financial records, and surveillance footage. The former cyber warfare specialist had built a fortress of electronics in what used to be a 1-bedroom apartment, complete with signal jammers, encrypted communications, and enough computing power to hack a small government. Nicholas Randall is a very interesting man, Spencer told Marcus over a secure video call. On the surface, he's exactly what he appears to be. Successful doctor, pillar of the community, married to political royalty. But scratch a little deeper. The first monitor showed Nicholas's financial records. He's hemorrhaging money. The medical practice is barely breaking even. He's got 3 mortgages on properties he can't afford. And his wife's divorce lawyer is demanding forensic accounting on everything he owns. Marcus studied the numbers. How much debt? North of $2 million and climbing. Elena Parrish Randall isn't just divorcing him. She's trying to destroy him financially. Her father's backing her play with the best lawyers money can buy. The second monitor displayed email intercepts. But here's where it gets interesting. Nicholas has been in contact with a pharmaceutical company called MedCore Industries. They're offering him a position as chief medical officer, salary package worth about $5 million annually. What's the catch? Spencer grinned. The job offer is contingent on his divorce being finalized and his reputation remaining intact. They can't afford to hire someone involved in a messy scandal. So Nicholas needs to get divorced without looking like the bad guy, and he needs to do it fast. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. That's where Ashley comes in. He's not just having an affair. He's creating evidence that his marriage was already over before he started cheating, setting up a narrative where he's the victim of a loveless marriage who found solace with another woman. Exactly. And there's more. The third monitor showed photographs of Nicholas meeting with men Marcus didn't recognize. These are private investigators, but not the kind who take photos of cheating spouses. These guys specialize in corporate espionage, personal destruction, making problems disappear. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of problems? The kind that might testify in divorce proceedings. Nicholas has been having affairs for years, but Elena's lawyers can't prove it because his previous girlfriends have all mysteriously developed amnesia, lost evidence, or simply disappeared from Detroit altogether. The pattern was clear now. Nicholas Randall wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a predator who used his connections and resources to silence anyone who threatened his carefully constructed image. Ashley wasn't his first victim. She was just the latest in a line of women who'd served his purposes and been discarded when convenient. What about Elena? Marcus asked. Spencer pulled up another file. Elena Parrish Randall is not someone you want as an enemy. Daddy might be the one with the Senate seat, but she's the one with the brains. Graduated Harvard Law, worked for the Justice Department before marriage, still has connections throughout federal law enforcement. Why isn't she using those connections to destroy Nicholas? Because she's playing a longer game. Elena wants to take Nicholas for everything he's worth, but she also wants to preserve the family's political reputation. A messy divorce with allegations of criminal behavior would damage her father's career. So she's being surgical, destroy Nicholas financially and personally, but keep it out of the headlines. Marcus stood and walked to his window. The surveillance team was back, different car this time, but the same pattern. They weren't trying to hide anymore, which meant they wanted him to know he was being watched. Psychological pressure, meant to make him nervous, make him do something stupid. Spencer, I need you to do something for me. Can you access Elena Parrish Randall's communications? That's federal law enforcement royalty, Marcus. Her emails are probably more secure than the Pentagon's. I'm not asking you to hack her emails. I'm asking you to deliver a message. Spencer's expression grew cautious. What kind of message? Marcus outlined his plan. It was elegant in its simplicity. Use Elena's desire for revenge against Nicholas to serve his own purposes, while giving her what she wanted most. Evidence that would destroy her husband's reputation and his future prospects. That's actually brilliant, Spencer admitted. But you're playing with fire. If Elena figures out you're manipulating her, she won't. Because everything I'm going to give her is true, and everything I'm asking for in return is something she already wants to do. That evening, Marcus sat in his truck outside Ashley's yoga class, watching her through the studio windows. She was beautiful, graceful, completely unaware that her husband was planning the systematic destruction of her lover and everyone who'd chosen to threaten him. His phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Going out with the girls after class. Don't wait up. Marcus knew the girls was code for Nicholas. They'd probably go to their usual hotel, make love like they were teenagers, talk about their future together once Ashley divorced her damaged war veteran husband. Nicholas would promise her the world, paint pictures of a life filled with money and security and social status. Marcus typed back, have fun. Love you. But love was a luxury he could no longer afford. Russell LeBlanc had died trusting Marcus to take care of his family, and Marcus had kept that promise through blood and violence. Now Ashley was breaking her promise to love and honor her husband, and Nicholas was using her to threaten Marcus's freedom and future. Some promises were sacred. Others were just words people said before they showed you who they really were. Marcus drove home through the quiet streets, past the surveillance car that was trying too hard to look invisible. Tomorrow, he would begin teaching everyone involved why betraying a special forces operator was the kind of mistake you only made once. His phone rang as he pulled into his driveway. Alfred Copeland's voice was tense. Marcus, we've got a problem. One of Russell's old squad mates, Don Parrish, no relation to the senator, was found dead in his apartment in Chicago. Apparent suicide, but the timing suspicious. Marcus felt cold rage building in his chest. Someone's cleaning house. Looks that way. Don had been asking questions about who was investigating Russell's unit. Whoever's behind this doesn't want word getting out that they're targeting military veterans. Marcus hung up the phone and sat in his truck, watching his house, thinking about Russell LeBlanc and Don Parrish and all the promises made to dead men who trusted their brothers to keep them. Tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest. Chapter 6. The Trap. Elena Parrish Randall sat in her father's study in Bloomfield Hills, reviewing financial documents that painted a picture of her husband's spectacular greed and stupidity. At 31, she possessed her father's political instincts and her mother's ruthless intelligence, wrapped in the kind of devastating beauty that made men underestimate her until it was too late. The anonymous email had arrived at precisely the right moment. Detailed financial records showing Nicholas's debts, photographs of his meetings with Medcore Industries executives, and most importantly, evidence of his systematic intimidation of previous mistresses. Everything she needed to destroy him completely, delivered by someone who clearly wanted Nicholas Randall to suffer. The question, she murmured to her father, is who our anonymous benefactor might be and what they want in return. Senator Donald Parrish looked up from his own papers. At 62, he was the kind of politician who'd survived 4 decades in Washington by understanding that information was the ultimate currency. Someone with access to private investigators, financial records, and intimate knowledge of Nicholas's activities. Someone with military or law enforcement connections. Elena studied the photographs again. Someone who wants Nicholas destroyed as badly as I do. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Romano's restaurant, tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Bring the documents I sent you. Elena smiled. She'd been looking forward to meeting her mysterious ally. Marcus arrived at Romano's 30 minutes early, taking a corner table with clear views of all entrances and exits. He wore a dark suit that concealed the Glock holstered at his hip, and his appearance had been carefully calculated to suggest military precision without obvious threat. He needed Elena to see him as a resource, not an enemy. She arrived exactly on time, moving through the restaurant with the confidence of someone who'd never been afraid of anything in her life. Tall, elegant, expensively dressed, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She slid into the seat across from Marcus without hesitation. You must be the husband, Elena said without preamble. Marcus Long, and you must be the woman who's going to help me destroy your husband. Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. I like a man who gets straight to the point. What do you want, Mr. Long? Marcus slid a manila envelope across the table. Complete surveillance records of Nicholas and my wife's affair. Dates, times, locations, photographs, audio recordings. Everything you need to prove adultery in your divorce proceedings. Elena opened the envelope, scanning the contents with professional interest. This is quite thorough, but I assume you want something in return. 3 things. First, I want your father's investigation into Russell LeBlanc's unit called off. It's based on false information designed to serve Nicholas's interests. Done. Daddy's already having second thoughts about that favor to Nicholas. Second, I want information about the people Nicholas hired to intimidate his previous girlfriends. Names, contacts, payment records. Elena's eyes narrowed. Planning some intimidation of your own? Planning to prevent them from intimidating anyone else. And the third thing? Marcus leaned forward. When Nicholas's world falls apart, and it will, I want your word that you won't interfere with whatever happens to him next. Elena studied Marcus for a long moment, seeing something in his eyes that made her glad they were on the same side. You're not planning to divorce your wife, are you? You're planning something much more permanent. I'm planning to keep the promises I've made. Everything else is just details. Elena extended her hand across the table. Mr. Long, I believe we're going to be excellent partners. They shook hands, and Marcus felt the final piece of his plan slide into place. Elena Parrish Randall was exactly what he'd hoped for. Intelligent, ruthless, and completely committed to destroying Nicholas Randall. With her resources and his skills, they would tear apart everything Nicholas had built, piece by piece. That night, Marcus sat in his study, cleaning his weapons while Ashley slept in their bedroom. Tomorrow, she would discover that her husband knew about the affair, but not in the way she expected. Tomorrow, Nicholas would learn that threatening a Special Forces operator's family had consequences that extended far beyond anything he could imagine. Marcus opened his laptop and typed a brief email to Grant Cannon. Execute Phase 1 tomorrow morning. Full surveillance package to Elena Parrish Randall by noon. Audio recordings to Ashley Long by 2 p.m. He closed the laptop and picked up Russell LeBlanc's photograph. Almost done, brother, he whispered. Just a little longer. Outside, the surveillance car sat in its usual position, the two men inside probably wondering why their target seemed so calm, so controlled. They didn't understand that Marcus had spent 12 years learning how to hunt, and that the best hunters always let their prey come to them. Tomorrow, the predators would become the prey. Chapter 7. First Blood. Ashley Long stood in the kitchen, staring at the manila envelope that had arrived by courier 30 minutes earlier. Her name was typed across the front in block letters, and inside were photographs that made her stomach turn. Herself and Nicholas in the hotel room, at restaurants, in his condo. Dozens of images spanning 3 months, chronicling every moment of their affair with professional precision. The note attached was brief. Your husband knows. Come home immediately if you want to save your marriage. Otherwise, keep walking and don't look back. Ashley's hand shook as she dialed Nicholas's number. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried his office, his condo, even his country club. Nothing. It was as if Nicholas Randall had simply vanished from the face of the earth. Marcus arrived home at exactly 3 p.m., as the note had promised. He found Ashley sitting at the kitchen table, the photograph spread in front of her like evidence at a crime scene. We need to talk, Ashley said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus hung up his jacket and sat down across from her. His face showed no emotion, no anger, no hurt, just the calm expression she'd learned to fear during their worst arguments. About what? Marcus asked. You know what? Ashley gestured at the photographs. How long have you known? Known what, Ashley? That my wife has been fucking another man for 3 months? That she's been lying to me every day, planning to leave me for someone with more money? That she's been meeting with lawyers about divorce proceedings while pretending everything was fine at home? Each word hit Ashley like a physical blow. Marcus's voice remained calm, conversational, as if he were discussing the weather rather than the destruction of their marriage. Marcus, I can explain. No need. You fell in love with someone else. It happens. People grow apart, find they want different things. I understand. Ashley looked up at him, confused by his reasonable tone. You understand? Of course. You married a broken soldier with nightmares and trust issues. Nicholas offered you a different life, money, status, stability. I can see the appeal. Then why? Ashley gestured at the photographs again. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Because you lied to me, Ashley. For months, you looked me in the eye and lied. You made plans behind my back, used our marriage as cover while you build a new life with another man. That's not falling out of love. That's betrayal. The word hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. What do you want me to do? Ashley asked. Pack your things. Take whatever you need. Move in with Nicholas. Start your new life. Just don't pretend this was about love or compatibility or any other noble bullshit. This was about you deciding I wasn't good enough anymore and being too cowardly to say so. Ashley stood up, anger finally breaking through her guilt. You want to know why I cheated? Because you're never here, Marcus. You disappear for days, won't tell me where you go or what you're doing. You wake up screaming in the middle of the night. You sit in this house, cleaning guns like you're preparing for war. I felt like I was married to a ghost. Marcus nodded as if she'd made a perfectly reasonable point. You're right. I'm not an easy man to live with. That's why you should have left instead of cheating. I try to make it work. No, you try to have it both ways. Keep the security of being married while exploring other options. That's not trying to make it work. That's hedging your bets. Ashley stared at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her take a step backward. What happened to Nicholas? I can't reach him anywhere. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, Ashley saw something dangerous in the expression. Why don't you ask Elena Parrish Randall? I'm sure she'd love to discuss her husband's whereabouts. The blood drained from Ashley's face. You told his wife? I didn't have to. Elena's been watching Nicholas for months, building a case for their divorce. She has photographs of every woman he's been with, financial records showing his debts, evidence of him intimidating his previous mistresses into silence. Nicholas has been playing this game for years. Ashley, you were just the latest victim. Ashley sank back into her chair as the full scope of her situation became clear. Nicholas hadn't been planning to leave his wife for her. He'd been using her as ammunition in his divorce proceedings, setting up a narrative where his marriage had failed due to irreconcilable differences rather than his own infidelity. But you already knew that, Marcus continued. Elena's lawyers contacted you yesterday morning, offered to pay for your testimony about Nicholas pursuing a married woman, about him promising to leave his wife, about all the lies he told you to get you into bed. Ashley's silence was confirmation enough. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, standing up. You're going to take Elena's money and testify against Nicholas. You're going to help her destroy him in court, take him for everything he's worth. And when that's done, you're going to disappear from Detroit and never contact me again. And if I don't, Marcus's smile widened. Then I'll release the photographs to your nursing supervisors, to your family, to everyone you've ever worked with or cared about. I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of woman you are. Ashley looked at the man she'd married, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a broken soldier struggling with civilian life, but a predator who'd been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment to strike. She'd betrayed him, and now he was showing her what real betrayal looked like. I loved you, Ashley whispered. No, Marcus replied. You love the idea of me, the hero husband, the man who'd fought for his country and come home to build a quiet life with you. But you never loved the reality of who I am. And now you get to learn exactly who that is. Ashley went upstairs to pack. Marcus remained at the kitchen table, studying the photographs of his wife's betrayal with the same detached professionalism he'd once used to study enemy positions in Afghanistan. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena Parrish Randall. Nicholas found in his office this morning. Apparent suicide. Left a full confession about his financial crimes and previous affairs. Divorce proceedings concluded in my favor. Thank you for your assistance. Marcus deleted the text and smiled. Nicholas Randall would never threaten anyone's family again. Chapter 8. Dominoes Fall. The news of Nicholas Randall's suicide dominated Detroit's social media for exactly 48 hours before Elena Parrish Randall's lawyers released documents that transformed the story from tragedy to cautionary tale. Financial fraud, systematic intimidation, serial adultery. The man who'd appeared to be a pillar of the community was revealed as a predator who destroyed lives for sport. Ashley sat in her sister's apartment in Chicago, watching the news coverage with growing horror. The suicide note, read aloud by a stone-faced police detective, painted Nicholas as a man overwhelmed by guilt over his treatment of women, his financial crimes, his betrayal of his wife's trust. There was no mention of murder, no suggestion of foul play, just a broken man who'd finally faced the consequences of his actions. But Ashley knew better. She'd seen something in Marcus's eyes, heard something in his voice that told her Nicholas's death was no suicide. Her husband, ex-husband now, the divorce papers had been filed within hours of her leaving Detroit, had killed before. She'd always known that, had seen the commendations and service records that spoke in euphemisms about direct action and neutralizing threats. What she never understood was that Marcus viewed betrayal as a type of warfare. Her phone rang. Elena Parrish Randall's name appeared on the caller ID. Ms. Haynes. Elena's voice was crisp, professional. I wanted to thank you for your testimony in my divorce proceedings. Your willingness to speak truthfully about my late husband's behavior was illuminating. I just told the truth about what he promised me. Of course. And I want you to know that the financial settlement we discussed will be honored in full. $200,000 deposited into the account you specified. Ashley closed her eyes. Blood money, payment for helping destroy the man she'd thought she loved. What about the investigation into his death? What investigation? The police found no evidence of foul play. Nicholas left detailed records of his financial irregularities, confessions of his affairs, even a complete list of the women he'd intimidated into silence over the years. He'd been planning his suicide for weeks. You don't really believe that. Elena's silence stretched long enough to make Ashley uncomfortable before she spoke again. Ms. Haynes, my late husband, was a predator who destroyed lives for his own gratification. He used his position, his connections, and his family's resources to silence victims and escape consequences. If someone helped him face justice, I consider that a public service. The line went dead. Ashley stared at her phone, understanding that she'd just been warned to keep her mouth shut about her suspicions. Elena Parrish Randall was exactly as dangerous as Marcus had suggested, and she was protecting him because he'd serve her interests. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in a downtown Detroit bar, nursing a beer and watching the news coverage of Nicholas's suicide. The bartender, a former Marine named Angelo Anderson, kept glancing at the television with obvious disgust. Guy like that, Angelo muttered, makes you wonder how many other pieces of shit are walking around in expensive suits, hiding behind money and connections. Marcus nodded, saying nothing. The bar was the kind of place where military veterans gathered to drink away memories they couldn't share with civilians, and Angelo had been one of Russell LeBlanc's friends before Russell deployed to Afghanistan. He'd attended Russell's funeral, had offered to help Marcus with anything he needed. You hear about that investigation into Russell's unit? Angelo asked. Heard it got dropped. Turns out it was based on false information. Angelo's expression darkened. False information from who? Marcus finished his beer and stood up. From people who aren't in a position to provide any more information. Angelo studied Marcus's face, reading the subtext. Good. Russell was a good man. Didn't deserve to have his memory pissed on by some politician's pet projects. Marcus left money on the bar and walked out into the Detroit evening. The surveillance team was gone, had been gone since Nicholas's suicide hit the news. Apparently, Senator Parrish had decided his investigation into Russell's unit was no longer a priority. His phone buzzed with a text from Grant Cannon. Package delivered to Chicago address. Subject, confirmed receipt. The package contained photographs of Ashley and Nicholas, copies of the financial records Elena had provided, and a detailed report on Nicholas's history of intimidating his victims. Everything Ashley would need to understand exactly what kind of man she'd fallen in love with, and exactly how she'd been manipulated. Marcus drove home through familiar streets, past the house where he'd tried to build a civilian life with a woman who'd never understood what she'd married. The house was empty now, Ashley's belongings gone, her presence erased as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. He sat in his study, surrounded by photographs and commendations from his military service, and opened his laptop. 3 emails waited in his secure account, each one confirming that loose ends had been tied up, that threats had been neutralized, that justice had been served. The men Nicholas had hired to intimidate his previous victims had been arrested on various charges: assault, extortion, drug possession. Elena's investigators had been very thorough in providing evidence to appropriate authorities. None of them would be threatening anyone else for a very long time. Don Parrish's death in Chicago had been ruled a suicide, but Marcus knew better. Someone had been cleaning house, eliminating potential witnesses to the false investigation of Russell's unit. That someone was now sitting in a federal prison, having been arrested for unrelated firearms violations based on an anonymous tip to the ATF. Senator Parrish had announced his retirement from politics, citing health concerns and a desire to spend more time with his family. Elena had provided her father with enough information about his association with Nicholas to convince him that a quiet exit from public life was preferable to a public scandal. Marcus closed the laptop and walked to his bedroom. For the first time in months, he expected to sleep without nightmares. The promises he'd made to Russell LeBlanc had been kept. The threats to his own safety had been eliminated. The people who betrayed him had faced consequences appropriate to their crimes. Tomorrow, he would begin rebuilding his life. But tonight, he would sleep the sleep of a man who'd completed his mission and come home victorious. Chapter 9. Resolution. 6 months later, Marcus Long stood in the cemetery where Russell LeBlanc was buried, holding the hand of a 6-year-old boy who bore his father's eyes and his mother's delicate features. Tommy LeBlanc had grown 3 inches and gained 15 pounds since coming to live with his aunt in Colorado, and his nightmares had finally stopped. "Uncle Marcus," Tommy said, using the title Marcus had taught him, "Daddy would be proud of you, wouldn't he?" Marcus knelt beside the grave marker, straightening the American flag that marked Russell's service. "What makes you say that, buddy?" "Aunt Sarah says you kept your promise to take care of me. She says promises to dead people are the most important kind." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. "Your daddy was my best friend, Tommy. Taking care of you isn't a burden, it's an honor." They stood together in the Colorado sunshine, two survivors of different wars, bound together by love for a man who died believing his sacrifice meant something. Marcus had established a trust fund that would see Tommy through college, had arranged for the best therapist money could buy, had made sure the boy would never want for anything. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Spencer Sherman. "Ashley Haynes married insurance salesman in Phoenix last month. Living quietly. No contact with anyone from Detroit. Thought you should know." Marcus deleted the text without responding. Ashley was part of his past now, a closed chapter in a story that had moved beyond her relevance. He'd kept his promise not to destroy her publicly, and she'd kept her promise to disappear from his life. Some endings didn't require revenge. Exile was punishment enough. Another text, this one from Elena Parrish-Randall. "Father's retirement party next month. You should come. I think you'd enjoy meeting some of his old defense contractor friends. They're always looking for security consultants with your particular skills." Marcus smiled at that. Elena had proven to be exactly the kind of ally he'd hoped for. Intelligent, connected, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her interests. She'd transformed her father's political connections into a business empire, and she'd made it clear that Marcus would always have a place in her organization. The work she offered was legal, lucrative, and perfectly suited to his skills. Corporate security, threat assessment, problem resolution for clients who prefer discretion over publicity. It was a chance to use his military training in service of people who understood the value of loyalty and the cost of betrayal. "Are we going home now?" Tommy asked. Marcus looked down at the boy who'd become the closest thing to family he had left. "Yeah, buddy, we're going home." They walked back to Marcus's truck, Tommy chattering about school and friends and the baseball team he'd joined. Normal childhood concerns, the kind Russell had dreamed his son would have. Marcus listened with the attention he'd once reserved for mission briefings, filing away every detail of Tommy's happiness like evidence of a job well done. The drive back to Tommy's aunt's house took them through the Colorado mountains, past landscapes that reminded Marcus why he'd served his country in distant wars. This was what freedom looked like. Wide open spaces, children playing safely, communities where people trusted their neighbors and kept their promises. Sarah LeBlanc met them at the door, Russell's younger sister who'd inherited his sense of humor and his devotion to family. She'd welcomed Tommy without hesitation, had accepted Marcus's involvement in the boy's life with the understanding that some bonds transcended conventional definitions. "How was the visit?" Sarah asked, ruffling Tommy's hair as he ran past her into the house. "Good. He's doing well. No nightmares, good grades, making friends." Sarah studied Marcus's face with the insight that came from growing up with a brother who'd chosen military service. "And how are you doing?" "Really?" Marcus considered the question seriously. For the first time in years, he wasn't carrying the weight of unfulfilled promises or unresolved threats. Ashley was gone. Nicholas was dead. The investigation into Russell's unit had been terminated, and the men who'd threatened Marcus's future were either imprisoned or neutralized. "I'm at peace," Marcus said finally. Sarah smiled. "Russell will be glad to hear that. He worried about you, you know. Used to say you were the kind of man who'd carry the whole world's burdens if someone let you." "Maybe, but I'm learning to choose my burdens more carefully." Marcus spent the evening with Tommy and Sarah, sharing dinner and watching the boy play video games with the concentration of a future tactician. This was what Russell had died for, the chance for his son to grow up safe, happy, surrounded by people who loved him. As Marcus prepared to leave for his hotel, Tommy ran up and hugged him tightly. "I love you, Uncle Marcus," the boy whispered. Marcus knelt down and returned the hug, feeling the simple weight of unconditional trust. "I love you too, buddy." and I'll always be here when you need me. It was another promise, but this one felt different. Not a burden carried in honor of the dead, but a gift given freely to the living. Tommy would grow up knowing he was loved, protected, valued. He would understand that promises made in love were sacred, and that real men kept their word regardless of the cost. Marcus drove back to his hotel through the mountain night, thinking about the future Elena had offered him and the life he was building from the ashes of his marriage. He learned that some betrayals were unforgivable, that some enemies had to be destroyed rather than defeated, and that justice wasn't always found in courtrooms or delivered by institutions. But he'd also learned that loyalty was still rewarded, that promises kept in darkness were often more valuable than those made in light, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply living well while your enemies faced the consequences of their choices. His phone rang as he reached the hotel. Alfred Copeland's name appeared on the caller ID. "Marcus, I've got a proposition for you. Private military contractor, government consulting, very lucrative. Interested?" Marcus smiled as he parked the truck. "Send me the details. I think I'm ready to get back to work." The war was over. It was time to start planning the next campaign. As he walked into the hotel lobby, Marcus felt the familiar satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Russell LeBlanc's son was safe, his enemies were defeated, and his promises were kept. Some men measure their lives in money earned or status achieved. Marcus Long measured his in promises kept and enemies destroyed. By that standard, he was a very successful man indeed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.